morning. We appreciate so much the spirit of music and the message and song. I want to just remind you that we're continuing to walk through Luke as best we can. This morning we'll be in Luke chapter 22. And while you're turning there, I want to apologize for my allergies. I also want to thank everybody that worked yesterday at the workday. I didn't expect it to be 140 degrees outside with 3,000% humidity, but we got through it. Thank everybody came in on Thursday and helped. We had a long list of work that needed to be done, and to the best of my knowledge, it all got done. I also want to apologize if you didn't understand they turned the water off to the church on Thursday and again on Friday at different times because of the work being done out here. So the boil advisory is over, but there is hand sanitizer, and we encourage you to be clean. So do what you need to do with that information. So use the hand sanitizer. We're blessed. You know, I was thinking about hand sanitizer as a sermon illustration. It's in there somewhere, isn't it? I mean, you know, sometimes the soap and water is good, but sometimes you need a little extra. I don't know where that's coming from. I want to remind you to be a part of our revival services in just 2 weeks starting on September 30th. We've asked you to make 3 commitments as part of our revival. We've asked you to pray very earnestly for 60 days beginning August 1st. We've asked you to be sharing these 30 days of September. I've asked you to make a commitment that unless providentially hindered, you'll be at all 5 services beginning Sunday morning, September 30th at 10 o'clock, and then nightly, Monday through Wednesday at 6:45. 6:45 is an unusual start time. Yes, it is. It's just because it's special. It's different. But if you can make all those services, just ask God to work your schedule. Talk to your bowling league now. Talk to all the people you normally do things with to make these nights a priority to be at the Lord's house. And we'll see what God will do in our lives. And we're going to pick up in Luke 22. And last Sunday morning we deviated a little bit. We did a part of our Proverbs last Sunday morning. But in Luke 22, we already addressed the verses 1 through 6 where Judas covenants with the enemy. And the Bible says clearly that Satan entered Judas, that they came together for the work that they had to do. Then verses 7 through 20, Jesus introduces what we would call the Lord's Supper. And we actually looked at this passage of Scripture a few weeks ago when we had the Lord's Supper. And then verses 21 through 30, Jesus reminds them that everything's about to change. It's not about who's the greatest in the kingdom. It's about being a servant. It's not about who gets the credit. It's that the kingdom grows. It's that the work of the kingdom moves forward. Then I want to pick up in verse 31 with you this morning. And I just want to see a very personal picture of Simon Peter beginning at verse 31. And Jesus speaks to him, the Lord speaks beginning at verse 31. Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. But I pray for thee, that thy faith fail not. When thou art converted, strengthen the brethren. He said to him, Lord, I'm ready to go with you both to prison and to death. And Jesus says, I tell you, Peter, the cock shall not crow this day, but thou hast thrice denied that thou knowest me. Now, in the midst of the conversation about who's the greatest and who's the servant and being least or being great or who would betray or who's important in the kingdom, in this chapter we find this important moment where Jesus begins a dialogue with Simon. Now, I find it particularly interesting that Jesus initiates this discussion. Simon is clearly the leader of the group. Now, how many of you are, and don't raise your hands, but how many of you are outspoken followers of Jesus Christ? How many of you are committed followers? How many of you are what others might call leaders? And yet Jesus looks very clearly in the heart of Simon and says, buddy, listen to me. Satan's already got Judas. And he's desiring you. He wants to sift you, as it were, how wheat is processed. Now, I am a city boy at every definition of city boy. I'm allergic to everything that you find on a farm. Huber's farm bothered me yesterday. Went up for Shirley's birthday shindig. It was 114 in the parking lot and 116 in the restaurant. It was horrible. They tried, but there was, I guess, 60, 70 of us there for her party. It was a great time. But I got to thinking about farms. Why in the world do people take pleasure in picking their own fruit? That's what JC is for. I just thrown that out for free. All right. But to sift as wheat is an incredible picture of the process. Making sure you only get the wheat, not the rest of the plant. To make sure that you don't get any weeds involved, because there's a weed that looks just like wheat. It's called darnel, or in the Bible, tares. Judas, in verses 1 through 6, remember, has already covenanted with the enemy. And after introducing the Lord's Supper, and after talking about how things are getting ready to change, Jesus looks Simon in the eyes. He says, okay, buddy, you're the leader of the group. You think you're special? Satan wants you desperately. Now I want to talk to you today who think that maybe you're a Christian and you're a leader. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. You better pay particular attention to the strategy of the enemy, or you'll succumb to him. Simon says, hey, I'm your man. But Lord Jesus, listen to me. Jesus, buddy, I got it covered. This is a Davison interflection here, okay? I've got it figured out. I am willing to go to prison for you. And I'm sure he meant it. I'm willing to die for you. And I'm sure he meant it. Jesus goes, not going to happen tonight. You're going to betray me, son? No. You're going to betray me 3 times? No. But before Simon and Jesus have that exchange, Jesus gives Simon the best possible news he could give him. Pick up with me again there. Simon, verse 32. I have prayed for you. Now, I don't know about y'all, but doesn't it encourage you when people say they're praying for you? I think that's an encouragement. A lot of people really, you talk to somebody, don't say it unless you mean it, but you shake their hand at a funeral, or you love them when they're going through a hard time, and you go, listen, I'm praying for you. Boy, it just means something, doesn't it? That the most important person we can spend time with is our Heavenly Father, and we're praying for somebody that we're burdened for. We love them enough to pray for them. And Jesus looks at Simon and goes, buddy, I'm praying for you. Very specifically, what does he say? That thy faith fail not, and when you are converted, you'll strengthen the brethren. Now, looking forward, we can be encouraged because although Simon's faith failed, it didn't completely falter. And when he got things settled, he encouraged the brethren. He said, Brother Steve, how do you know he did that? Well, he preached the message at Pentecost, and a lot of folks got saved, remember? Not only that, but Peter wrote part of the Bible. And it's encouraged people for the last 2,000 years. I said, Brother Steve, it just seems like you're leaving the story hanging here. Well, what do you mean he's going to betray him? Well, let's skip down a few verses and let's see what happens to Peter. So pick up with me, if you would, at verse 54. Now remember, Jesus has been arrested in the interim period here. Normally we spend all our energy talking about Jesus being arrested, and we'll get to that. But I want you to see Peter, verse 54. So they took him, that's Jesus. Jesus has been arrested. He's been led off, and he's been brought to the high priest's house. And Peter, who, according to Peter, remember, verse 33, I'm ready to go with you. I'll go to prison. I'll go to death. So far, Peter's doing pretty good, isn't he? Jesus has been led away to the high priest's house, and who is following him? Simon Peter. We should be encouraged. He's keeping his word. Notice what happens next. Then they begin to kindle a fire in the midst of the hall. They were set down around it, and Peter sat down among them. It was chilly that evening. I know it's hard for us to remember what that feels like, but it was pretty cool that evening, so they started a little fire there, fire pit going. Everybody gathers around the fire, right? So Peter gathers around the fire. He's cold, he's chilled. And a certain maid says, that's sitting there by the fire, looks at him and says, "This man was also with him." Peter goes, "Woman, what are you talking about? I don't know him." Warmed himself at the fire because he was cold. And then a little while, another one said, verse 58, "Thou art also of them." And Peter said, "Man, I am not." Now, I mean no disrespect to anybody, but you understand in the culture at the time, an accusation by a woman carried less significance than an accusation from a man. So watch the progression here. A lady says, "Aren't you one of them?" Peter said, "Woman, leave me alone." Everybody else said, "Okay, Bible, leave him alone." And then this time a gentleman says something, and Peter goes, "Buddy, I don't know what you're talking about." And then finally, after an hour, the Bible says in verse 59, another one confidently affirmed of a truth this fellow was with him, for he is Galilean. And Peter says, "Man, I know not what you're saying." And immediately, while he yet spoke, the cock crew. Jesus said in verse 34, "Peter, before this night's over, 3 times, you'll deny that you even know me." Verses 54 through 60 there, we see very clearly 3 times before the morning sound of the animals, Peter had indeed denied Christ 3 times. Peter said, "Lord, I'll go wherever. I will follow you to jail. I will follow you to death." And sure enough, Peter follows him to the high priest's house. Look at verse 54 again. Peter's following, he's following Jesus like he promised. But in the midst of following Jesus, in the midst of being an outspoken leader, in the midst of being the man, he betrays him 3 times. All of Peter's hopes, everything Peter thought about himself comes crashing down. We're not exactly how far Peter may have been from where Jesus was. We have serious disagreements about the high priest's house and where this fire pit may have been. And scholars are divided, and that doesn't surprise you because scholars like to argue things, but we don't know how far apart they were, but they were close enough apparently where Jesus could turn his attention to where Peter was. Verse 61 tells us that the Lord turned and looked at Peter, and Peter remembered the words of the Lord. How he said, "Before the cock crows, thou wilt deny me thrice." It's one thing to disappoint somebody you care about. It's another thing to deny somebody you say you care about. Every so often, little kids show in and all they got school just full, but we're not taught it because they want to. Well, some kids should have good shit in. Nobody carried help. Somebody high factor their deceiver. He'd already Jesus Christ. Believed everything he was, and he followed the death. Poor night, and I even made us. How did he respond? What it says in 6 to all you know. He now wept. Can I be a something for you? You'll fairly weep bitterly. You'll never see somebody in church weep bitterly when they point towards Jesus. Never see somebody halfway to the dogs weep bitterly. I know Jesus. What you did, what the people who didn't commit to Christ say or voice and follow the kingdoms of the Spirit and by their sin. The Bible says Peter out and wept bitterly. They all entered the circle. Last night is show next to earlier. I'm not who pray. I want to hurry this morning. More else created is I have to look at Jesus' prayer beside you. Instant, I want to come and up. So I'll give us as verse 32. I pray thee that faith not. When you can drink, brother. Wonder. Don't see Jesus inflicting to know. remind us that what happened here. In your faith, you will, was peace, faith. Say, well, time, of course, you and out on cloud. Then the play did him for the reason, follow Jesus, wrong reason, section. People accuse me of Jesus, oh, Jesus. Crowds mock Jesus, and you got Paul, and I said, you were one more Christian. Now, people pray, but is that a faith? You're wretched. You're going to be strengthened. And in verse 2, his son to his life. He wept bitter. Folks, I see people figure, I know people like people cry out, people come to people take shit. I had one at my time, Pastor Christ said, I can't do that. Just see, he's saying, I care. You don't want to preach to him. I want to remind you to don't think foully until he's changed everything. Peter, you fail. But we've changed when you flinch. 6:2. Well, verse 6. Last time Peter, but your Lord. Don't forget about to that. Now he's a Greek Paul. And I think both are the first gospel done. This gospel change. You, that's it, you have it. Jesus got your church, but you guys failed. You just said it. Broke God, you were moved forward. But not Jesus said, but I want to use scripture morning. Just for you, just verse Hebrews. It's on this Hebrews 5. Great scripture says, it was a Christian heaven. It's just supposed to be the hurries. And one thing that he is able to say to the most come God because he is ever to intercede for them. He ever being to make a sin. I do again. Every time you're down praying on the drink, this is going to make sure this evening. Every time having a day tries to find but out he's overwhelming ground, he's holy, and he's full. Jesus is for you. He's for you. John's 10, that great prayer, Jesus raised Father, mentioned by him in there, because he's not over thee. Those will have praise will pass serve over. Jesus prayed for you. That morning, I was at a door for my school. I had my gun, and I was visible. The man up to see how I crawled middle. He said, I went, you're a person. I said, pastor. I said, 3 sisters, altars. And he looked funny, like, on Zoom's, all faithful. And I said, I'm the first pastor. I said, I'm pastor. New cross, I'm great pastor. Full of reasons. I have to intercede for people. God. I don't need it for because into this, right? He's intercede for me. I don't share with other people. My people. I did Sunday class on a very open burden on myself. I trusted them. Prayer method, I shared with them. But I'm being on air in a appreciate it. But according to God, go out in prayer, Jesus is right before he ever lived. It's for you. Pray on the behalf of Steve Echo. Steve Messler, we bless with. First, Jesus, look at all the Steve Cross. Father, just here. And praise Jesus. I say, that's God. Jesus, take it. I don't have God to that word. How did you love him? Get up. He's a proud, bigger advocate and going on your behalf. Say, Lord, Father, lead us like this. Oh, bad that family, they got Dave when it's a blank. Give it straight to it. You're Lord, put his word. His memories for him now. I'll replace him beside that. His whole to make you see. He's the house. Pray for you. He's interceding Father. I wonder what was this for you. I suggest you have put program in me too. Now, later too. I'm for you. It's back to the there, but it has to pray for kids. It's this verse that we don't need much of the language. Jesus, I come to you. I have been you with the I'm for you. Never somebody prayed for yourself. Never prayed for that. Never prayed again. Not good at that. Just had I beg future case that you find when you truly do the part lessons. Following up session. Pray for the people of session. Letting them stand and be part of the family. And I think Jesus prayed for me. I want to pray for you prayer. So I want to ask you faith. Jesus pray for you. You know, many are faith today. Something happens. Been encouraged those that there are a few Jews he can claim for sick. They wants to strike. He wants to divide. He wants to deserve. He wants to absolutely feed you. Because he knows if you want to, he can't do me dead. Try to stretch and wait, divide and back. You find the death for you. Don't. First difference gets more people love to feed you. He loves to discourage you. He loves to seek your faith. But Jesus said, pray your full night. When you hear absolute so and understand his only, you're going to see from there. Morning, I was someplace. Oh, I'm like, oh, yeah, I'll stop for you. I'll never say something. Doesn't make sense. Jesus looks at your heart as this. You're the sad life. You being dead to a life through birth. was lost. Now, the old right blind. Now, remember, do you remember sick moment? I don't remember. I don't know if you were talking. Do you remember a sick moment you went deadline? And then if you're getting discouraged, you're defeated. I wonder today, Jesus here. All the work is strong in Jesus interviewing you. He heard us to bear sin for the Lord. What did David besides salvation? Jesus strength, discipleship, devotion, and David. This is my now your courage. Life hard. Struggle. The prayer your is God that you are most active. I want you to know you're a Christian, that you say to others, Jesus is for you. That you're not. Just remember. This morning, not in your birth. I beg of you, you have all time to take. We add confront nothing to go to the fact that there isn't special. You know, and you got to do, you got to do. Chapter 2, the devil Judas. 1, many of you got to do fall. I said, Lord, the is like the area. Don't get. Never live to make yourself. Go say